Hey y'all, it's Erica of the Milk Manual, and I'm so excited for this video today because we're going to be talking all about tips and tricks on how to feel good as a hospital IBCLC. I worked in the hospital for about 4+ years as an IBCLC, and then prior to that, I worked in the hospital for 4 years as a mother-baby nurse. So when it comes to being in a hospital setting, I do feel like I excel there because I know what to expect, I got comfortable, and I learned a lot. Obviously now I work with a private practice group, so I do home visits and office visits, but I started doing private practice, like training for it and working in it while I was also working in the hospital. And this job has helped me so much, has helped me learn so much about how to be a better lactation consultant in a hospital because I get a lot of people who came from the hospital. Working in both and hearing what people had to say about their hospital lactation experience really put it into perspective for me in the home setting, but also once I was at work, I kind of learned like, okay, this is how people feel about hospital lactation consultants. This is lots of people's negative experiences. And I will say, like, obviously I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but I do think that I did my best when I worked in the hospital. And that is another reason why I feel good about doing this video. Now, to start off though, I want to say I am in no way saying like I'm the best of the best, like my way or the highway, I have the best advice. This is just what worked for me and what made me feel like I was thriving. Like I seriously would just be like walking those halls, like I just felt confident. And I also, not only did I feel confident, but I also felt like I was genuinely helping people in the best way that I could in a hospital setting. One thing I do want to say about working in a hospital is while I do felt that I excelled in that particular space, I also feel like working in a hospital as a lactation consultant can feel very like you're swimming upstream. I think that's the right saying. Like I just felt sometimes just very conflicted. Like I couldn't do my job the most efficient way because I was in a hospital, and there's so many other factors that went into doing my job that made things harder, and we'll get into that later. But also at the end of the day, I don't want to badmouth the hospital system, but I also feel like as someone who works in it, there were times where it was very much so quantity over quality. Like how many people can you see as a lactation consultant rather than how well can you serve the people in front of you. And that is what makes it so hard, and what puts a lot of lactation consultants in a burnout situation is that mindset of, I guess, US healthcare. I don't know. We're not gonna get that deep. We're just gonna help whoever's watching this. We're gonna focus on being the best that we can in that situation with all that we have. I know every hospital is different, so the first thing I would say is talk to, your managers, talk to your coworkers, see what resources you have, and see kind of what the situation is like in your hospital. I've had a couple of people who actually reached out to me to ask me to make a video about this, and I know that those people have said like, I will be the first lactation consultant in this spot. So I'm also going to be kind of talking more so in a way like, if you don't have any resources put in place, here's some ways that maybe you can try and do it. So to get started, let's talk about what to expect in a hospital situation. And this is where I'm like, ooh, because you don't know what to expect. But I would say here's what to expect is you'll see, a parent and a baby, and it just really depends on how big or small your hospital is. So I know some people have told me that they'll see up to 20 people in one day because there's only one lactation consultant. And then when I first started, I would see a total of 10, so 5 pairs per day. And when I was doing that, I felt so good about it. I felt so confident. I felt that I was able to give myself more to them. Like I was able to be just with them more. And management, and a lot of people thought that meant, oh, you're not really doing anything, But truthfully, if we valued women's health care and maternal mental health, everyone would know that having support is so important, and that is what the role I felt that I was doing. Not only was I providing lactation education and assistance, but I also felt that just to be another person there to support them however they needed was also important. So again, that is a tangent, and that's a conversation for another time, but I was seeing 5 pairs, 5 couplets when I first started. And then as time went on, they were like, well, we need you to see 7, or, I don't work there anymore, but a lot of people said that they see a lot more than that now. And the thing is, it is feasible in a 12-hour shift. Yeah, is that any? Yeah, or wait. No, we would see more than that in the beginning. I want to say it was like 10 rooms in 10 hours, or 10 rooms in 12 hours. So maybe that's 20. Either way, this sounds wild now because I'm like barely can remember, but the number that I saw in the beginning was the perfect amount. And then as time went on, they started increasing it and increasing it. Yeah, I want to say actually it was 10 rooms in the beginning, which would be 20 pairs, so on what to expect, not every room's gonna be nursing. I feel like that's something to go into a room knowing that. And I always like to remind, parents and other healthcare professionals that it's not my job as a lactation consultant to tell you need to breastfeed. It is my job as a lactation consultant to help you feed your baby in whichever way works for you. So with that being said, like I said, there might be some families who choose to exclusively pump. There may be some families that choose to not nurse at all and they would prefer to formula feed. There may be some families who, really want to nurse. There may be some families whose baby has gone to the NICU. So going into a room, I think it's always important to introduce yourself like, hey, I'd always say, hey, my name's Erica. I'm here with the Lactation and Infant Feeding Department. I am here to just see how feedings are going and see what I can help you with, I never strictly said just breastfeeding because I wanted them to feel comfortable talking to me about any type of feeding. So I think going on what to expect, walking into a room, making sure like there's going to be lots of different scenarios. That's one thing. And then also what to expect is like how busy you're going to be. I can't tell you, obviously, that's something that will be very hospital specific on how busy it will be, but writing down a plan. So when I started my shift, 12-hour shift, the first thing I did was go and get my patient's history as fast as I could. I'd also use that time to drink my iced coffee, but that's neither here nor there. So what's it called? It's not habit stacking, but I would do something I didn't love to do with something I did love to do, so it made me excited to do that thing. So it was like, I hate charting, I hate looking up patient information, but I love drinking coffee, so it was like combining those things made it just like a fun experience. And if you follow me on Instagram, I talk about this all the time with things like pumping. Like, I feel like if you don't like pumping, pair it with something you do love so you start to associate with that. Okay, let's get back to the topic at hand. I would work on my clients' charts and learn about them, and some of the things that are important to know as a lactation consultant before you walk into a room, obviously, is like, this is just a couple of things, and I'm sure there's other books that will talk more about this, but kind of like, what baby number is it? You won't know if they've had any previous feeding experience from this because it could be somebody's 3rd baby, but it could be their first time nursing. So that number, I'd always say, don't just write them off. Don't just think, oh, this is her 7th baby, she doesn't need help. I've had a situation where it was someone's 7th child and they were like, I really want to breastfeed this time. And I remember so many times that their paper would get passed or their room would get like kind of ignored because it was a 7th baby. So people assume she's fine. I need to help a first-time parent. But when it comes to feeding a baby, I treat every baby I treat every room as if it is the first time. So don't let that number do anything for you. But I think it is important to know because then you can kind of learn about the situation at hand. You can learn like, okay, well, if it's her seventh, she's held a baby before, she might, like, her body might be producing milk at a faster rate. You know what I mean? Like, there might be some history here. You know, it gives you more to kind of talk about and to dig into. Kind of if they have any significant medical conditions, disorders, anything like that, I, you know, want to make sure we open up the conversation right then and there, talking about diabetes, thyroid disorders, PCOS, any type of fertility related things, just kind of getting straight into that and having that conversation. And again, all of this is to say, if you walk in and you say, like, I'm here to help you, how would you like to be helped? And they tell you, oh, I'm good. Then I personally take that as a sign to be like, okay, you don't need my help. You are good. I'm not going to force myself on you. I'm not going to force anything lactation related on you. So once someone says, oh, I'm good, I don't need your help, I would still leave them with resources outside of the hospital where they can get more breastfeeding help, like a sheet. And if your hospital doesn't already have one of those, then I would highly recommend you making one, finding at least 3 local, you know, maybe a WIC, a La Leche League, any type of support group, and then maybe finding 3 local IBCLCs that do private practice or home visits to put on this sheet of paper and just put local resources on it. And then you could also put websites like mine. You could also put websites and those type of things, just giving them resources to say that, like, okay, we helped you. You didn't need help in the hospital, but a lot of times people go home and that's when everything changes. The engorgement happens, you know, or baby's latch changes because of the engorgement. So many things happen once you leave the hospital that I feel like people aren't prepared for or aren't knowledgeable about. And we'll also get to that too. I know I'm all over the place. So let's just get back to whenever you go into a room and they don't want your help and you just have to say, okay, like, that's fine. And in that case, I still try and see how I can help them. Like, do you want me to refill your water? Again, I know that's not a part of my job, but I am there for support and to care for somebody that just went through something life-changing. So asking them for water, asking them if they just need anything in general. And again, if they're just like, no, and kind of like want you out of the room, wish them congratulations and bounce. Like, so many people complain that there's too many staff members in their room, and that's true. And we don't need to be that person if they don't want us there. You give as much as you can and then you bounce. Also, if your hospital has cell phone numbers or anything where they can contact you, I still put my number on the board and I say, if you change your mind, if you need anything at any time, like, you just let me know. Call me. You call me. That's another thing. I always tell people, you call me, because you know when the baby's feeding, but I don't. So anyways, going back to a client who does want help. We've already kind of asked them about how many babies they've had, or we've already looked at their chart, to see how many babies that they've had, to see if they have any medical conditions, to see if they've had any breast surgeries, breast trauma. So there's lots of things like that you'll look at prior to walking into their room. If you don't have time, don't beat yourself up about it, because I think that's something, this whole thing is something that can be eliminated from your steps if you don't have time. I know for a fact that sometimes I would just walk in, see how many rooms that I had, and I'd be like, oh, we gotta go. Okay, like, I gotta get to the rooms. I don't have time for this. And you can still establish that rapport in the room. You can still pull up their chart in the room while you're talking to them. You just have to know, in so many cases, things aren't always going to be perfect and pretty and organized. You kind of just have to go with the flow in a hospital setting. And sometimes that means you walk in the door, someone says, hey, Erica, this room really needs to see you. You just say, okay, I'm going in. Like, okay, I'll go in. I'll figure out who they are, what their name is, how old their baby is, all of that type of stuff in the room. Oh, and that's another one, baby's gestational age at birth. So obviously there's a huge difference between a 40-week baby and a 35-week baby, and that is something that's important to know going into a room, educating parents on what to expect. So now that we've kind of gone over at least the beginning part of where I would start my shift, now we get into the room. Knock, knock, knock. Of course, you always knock, you guys, always knock. Go in, introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Erica. I'm a part of the lactation and infant feeding department. I'm just here to see how I can help y'all and to see if there's anything that you need feeding related. We talked about what they would do if they say no. Also, sometimes people will be like, no, we're just formula feeding. And because of so many stigmas of, one, I feel like just being a lactation consultant comes with a stigma. And then giving formula comes with a stigma. So when we go into a room, it always has this tense energy of like a stick up, like very tense energy. And it's like, for what? There should not be tense energy, but I know it's because there's a history there, right? Like I know that. So I try and make it in that moment where people say, no, we're just doing formula, and they seem kind of cold. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. Like, what kind of formula are you using? And here's the thing, people don't know this, but as a lactation consultant, it is, I think it is my job also to make sure you are educated on formula feeding, because there is still proper, or not proper because I don't like that word, there are still like ways that you're supposed to make sure you introduce a bottle or give milk or prepare the milk. Like all of that is super important as well. So, and then same with the outside resources. Some people don't know like what kind of formula to get or where to get it. Like we can't just go in and assume that because people are formula feeding that they don't need help, because some people do need help, you know? So in that case, in our hospital, I don't know if it's every hospital, but in the hospitals where I've worked, we've had the liquid formula. So once they tell me that they're formula feeding, I still try and devote some time, because I know it's not going to be long. And I know that once I'm done with that room, that is no longer a room that I actually have to continue going to. So I want to serve them in that moment. So for the formula feeding rooms, going in, when they say like, no, I'm just formula feeding, I never try and talk to them about breastfeeding, but I do think it's important to talk to them about breast changes and weaning and milk cessation. I can't remember the exact term right now, but to stop the milk from coming. So some people in the hospital, especially if they've had multiple children, they'll get home and call us and they'll say, you know, I'm formula feeding, but my breasts are hard. They're like, what can I do? So making sure to talk to them about those things, you know, ice packs, the pain medication, cabbage leaves, like whatever we can, information we give them on stopping that, I think is helpful in the hospital, and just kind of giving them that expectation where this might happen. I want you to be on the lookout for it, and this is how you stop it, because I think that's important for them to know, like, we are still supporting you, and I know about breasts, and that is still a part of your body, whether you choose to breastfeed or not, so we need to make sure we're taking care of those breasts. So I educate them on that. And I feel like a lot of times people are so thankful, and I just love that. Like, I love how sweet everyone is afterwards, and how we're no longer in a stick up situation. There's no more tension. The vibes are immaculate. Like, we can just kind of hang out. And then I also in that moment ask them if they know about how to prepare the formula here in the hospital, because, you know, once you twist it, just kind of giving the CDC guidelines for the timing on drinking from the bottle and opening the bottle and those type of things, making sure to talk to them about that. Sometimes the nurses will do this, so if the nurse has already done it, I'm not going to do it. So I always ask, like, hey, has the nurse talked to you about this? And if they say yes, then we just keep it moving. I don't know if it's allowed, ask your facility, like, I don't know. But I would also make sure to bring them extra bottles, extra nipples, like kind of take care of them in that moment, because I know I don't have this room anymore. You know what I mean? Like, now this room gets scratched off of a list because they likely will not call me. And that means I can take on another room of people who will call me. So that is a formula feeding room, and kind of what I would do in those situations. I would still leave my number. I would still give resources. I would make sure that they were hooked up with, like, that they knew if they, you know, needed WIC or anything, like you can get formula from those places, and just kind of making sure you still are supportive in those cases. The next situation, let's say you walk in and there is a NICU family, and I always go with so much grace towards my NICU families, because I can't imagine how hard it is to be in a hospital and not have your baby with you, not to mention just having a baby, the C-section, even vaginally, just moving around a hospital and being uncomfortable and all of those type of things. So there's a lot of grace that goes into this as well. If you don't have in your facility a NICU guide, then I would highly recommend looking online for, I think WIC has one. I'm not 100% sure. I will say I made one as well, but I don't know. It's not as hospital. I don't know how to say it. I made one as well, but it's not the same as some of the others that I've seen. I'll put the link in my bio for it as well to see if, like, maybe it'll be helpful. But no matter what, I would say having a system for the NICU families, making sure you have all of the stuff that they would need if they're going to the NICU frequently. So depending on what your NICU does, I'm not sure, but our NICU would take them in syringes with labels on them. So whenever I'd go into a NICU room, we would always have all of our stuff ready to go, a basin for cleaning, soap, syringes, pump parts, all of those type of things ready to go in a bag. Like I would take it to the room and then we would go over the whole process. So I think just having an organized system there, as well as a little NICU booklet or a guide, just kind of telling them what to expect each day and what to expect as far as like having a baby in the NICU. I'm gonna search for a link to see if I can find where the hospital got those books, but hopefully every hospital has them because I think it would be very valuable. So for a room that's exclusively pumping, it's gonna be very similar to NICU except the baby's in the room. So in this case, you would make sure to educate on pumping, hand expression, utilizing tools that you have in the hospital that can help with those things. So like heat to warm them up, like the heating pads that are really meant for like vaginal, but sometimes I put them on the chest, just little things like that. And then I think I have a fun TikTok video that kind of showcases how you can use hospital pieces to work their way into lactation, like in a different way. And I'll leave a link for that below as well. Okay, so we've gone through 3 different types of rooms that you may encounter. And now we're gonna go to the typical one that you would encounter as a lactation consultant, and that would be the mother, baby, dyad, the people that are gonna be doing the feedings, and how you can help them. So let's start from the beginning there. You walk into the room, knock, 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 you know, to do the introduction, go into the room, talk to them. Now, if the baby is not hungry in that moment, or if the mom's asleep, or if they're busy, this can make our job so much harder, but this is life and we have to be able to like maneuver around it. So in this case, I always make it a point to say, okay, I will be here for X amount of hours. Please, 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 if you need help, to call me. And again, really emphasize that they have to call you. A lot of people will tell me, working in private practice, lactation came by once and they never came back. And I try not to really talk so much about that because it's the past and that experience doesn't matter as much. But because I've been there, I always, you know, want to kind of hear more about this conversation and the follow-up of it, because I've had some people say, you know, lactation said they'd come back, but they never did. And I'd say, like, did you call them? Did you request them? And they're like, well, no, they said they'd come back. And it's like, yes, we should be going back, but at the same time, I don't know when your baby's gonna eat again, but the parent knows when the baby's gonna eat. So it's like really emphasizing that. And I would always tell them like, hey, please, you just call me as soon as you see hunger cues. And again, as much education as we can give in those little pockets. So making sure to tell them about the hunger cues. And I would always say, like, as soon as you see hunger cues, please, like, in that moment, you could start waking baby up. If you want to call me around that time, I could be in another room. And I try and make sure I always tell people, like, I could be in another room. I could be busy. So we all have to work together at getting this done. And again, this is what's hard about the hospital is like, there's a million people that will need to be in that room working with this family. And there's going to be a million times where I'm going to have to be in another room working with other families. But I think as long as you have, you know, set the expectations, made sure to have open communication about how it is to work in a hospital and what you can and can't do, that is so important. And I think that goes a long way. So in this case, you know, hey, here's my number, please call me. And then on my own personal little, I'd have a clipboard with all the stuff. I'd write like a little star next to that room, knowing that I've been in the room, but I haven't helped them yet. So it would be like a mental note, like, hey, Erica, you might need to check in with them at a certain time. And my timeline for checking in with people was always like 2 to 3 hours before I left. Only because some people would do it right before they left and then they would have to stay late. And baby, I only work in the hospital. I will only work at the time I'm getting paid. I will not be staying late. So situation where you go in and you aren't ready to help in that moment. Like I said, you can do some small educating possibly, but you really got to read the room. Now, say we go in and baby is ready to feed, that's when we start to do our job. And so the first thing, always talking to them, introducing them, make sure you always ask for consent whenever touching their bodies or even their babies. I would always ask, like, is it okay? Would you like me to do this? Because I've been there where people walk in and they're just like all over the place, and that's rude. And a lot of parents have complained to me about that, straight up said like, no, my lactation consultant just forced this and did this, and we don't want to be that. Like, we don't want to do that. So if the baby's still in the bassinet, I'll go over, ask them if I can unswaddle the baby and bring the baby to them. I try and emphasize unswaddling the baby in a hospital situation because those blankets are bulky. Those blankets are so hard, in my opinion, to nurse with. Not to mention, unswaddling really gives us a chance to learn more about the baby and its body in relation to feedings. Once I've unswaddled the baby in the bassinet, then, looking at the baby from head to toe, you learn a lot about the baby, doing an assessment. I learned how to do oral assessments, so I always check for a lip and tongue tie. I know that I can't diagnose them, but if I see anything, I usually say something, and that's on period. Like, if somebody has a problem with that, then fight me. Okay, but seriously though, I always say, like, I am a registered nurse, I'm a lactation consultant, I am not a doctor, I cannot diagnose anything, and this is where outside referrals are really important, or you can talk, it just depends on the tongue-tie political climate in your hospital situation. Because in ours, I would see it, I would say something, and then the pediatrician would say opposite, or people would get upset that it was discussed in the hospital, and it can be very controversial. So I'd always recommend following up with private practice lactation consultant who can help them get resources that meet their needs a little bit more. Again, and this is more so like, here's options for you. Here's just things that you know about. Now, not every baby gets an oral assessment in a hospital, and that's okay. Sometimes it is quick, we're latching and we're not even thinking about that. But this is another reason why I feel that there should be better pay for lactation consultants in hospitals, which would probably keep them there longer. You'd have like better staff, and we could give this the quality over the quantity. We could spend more time with less people, but that is not efficient in a hospital's eyes, I guess. They would rather us see more people in a short amount of time. And while that may seem effective and smart, whenever you dig deep and see what lactation consultants really do, and what parents really need, we all know, lactation consultants know and parents know, we need more support, we need more help, we need more education, we need so much more. But until the whole world gets on board, it's like, let me get off my soapbox. So after you have done an oral assessment, then we go for the feeding. Depending on the situation, I, for the most part, will say, I want to see what you've been doing. And some people will straight up be like, I don't know. And in those cases, you have to read the room. You have to read the person that's in front of you. If they feel more anxious, you do have to step in more. If they are more like, no, I want to do it, then step back. But I try and verbally walk them through steps before I get hands-on. And this was a learning experience for me because I am a Virgo sun, but I also am very technical, so I prefer to do everything myself. I'm very independent. I know I can latch the baby on. I know I can, but at the end of the day, that's not my job. It's for me to do it. My job is to help them feel confident doing it. So I really started to train myself just as a mother, like verbally dictating things to my kids, even though I want to do it myself. And I do the same thing in a work situation where instead of saying, here, let me move the baby for you, just looking at the family and saying things like, okay, with your right hand, like try and bring the baby in. You want the baby's body to look a certain way. I just feel like that them doing it themselves and you giving the direction helps them so much more than you latching and leaving. So if I do have to latch for them, then I do it, and then I say, okay, how does it feel? It feels great, blah, 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 blah. Then we take the baby off and have them repeat that same step. Because at the end of the day, I think the goal whenever you leave the hospital is to make sure that they can do it themselves. Because obviously I can't go home with them. After we've gotten the latch, in that situation, that's when I would start charting. getting all the extra hospital related work done. That's when I would also educate on the first 24 hours and what to expect, as well as the next day and what to expect. So really just kind of talking to them, seeing if they have questions or concerns. I always say, it definitely can be a lot. Like, most of the time people don't remember. There's been times when I've gone to somebody's room 2 days in a row and they were like, nobody came yesterday. And I was like, no, someone did. It was me. I was in your room for an hour and they're like, oh, I don't remember that. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, some things are not going to be remembered. So this is why it's super important, I think, to have written things, like things written down. So a document, something like that, that just kind of says like, hey, here's outside resources. Here are websites that go over certain things. I'm going to leave a link for a website that I often used for patients that didn't speak English. So we get lots of like Spanish speaking, Chinese, I would say those two languages. And I would make sure to have printouts for them in a language that they spoke, as well as using a translator to make sure we like communicated efficiently. So in the time when they're feeding, it's a time to just do lots of education, lots of what to expect when you leave the hospital. And like I said before, answering any questions, addressing any concerns, having a conversation. And you don't have to stay for the whole feeding, but I would stay as long as I possibly could, or as long as it took me to chart. And once baby comes off, kind of letting them know. A lot of people ask the same questions. And it got to the point where my first couple of weeks that I worked in the hospital, I would start writing those questions down afterwards. And that's how I built my Instagram, is because a lot of things on my Instagram were questions that people always asked. It was always the same questions. And as they continue to ask those same questions for you, then you could also like have a frequently asked question document and just be able to give that and send them home with it. And I just think having more printouts and or even websites, information that they can take with them will just be more tangible, I guess. Like, it'll just be better. And then having those resources outside of the hospital, always have places that they can go if they need help that's not the hospital. Always know of some other like private practice, office, like IBCLCs outside of the hospital where they can get additional help. We talked about what we do in one room when we stay in the room the whole time. So let's circle back to that other room that the baby was not ready to feed. So say I've gone through my whole list. I've seen everyone. I've done all of my stuff. I've eaten lunch, and I look at my list again and I see the ones with stars on it. That's when I would instantly go back, regardless of the time. Go back into those rooms, see how they're doing, help them out if they need help. If the same situation happens, then again, I'd say, okay, can you please call me whenever you need help? And I know it's messed up, but in these cases, there's times when I think, okay, well, maybe lactation is just not as much of a priority to them. And that's fine, because that is the choice that they've chosen to make. It could also be that they, have a lack of sleep, or they're just so busy in the hospital. But again, it is, in my opinion, on them to reach out to me at that point, because I've tried all that I can do. And because, again, I said already, this specialty comes with that stigma of lactation being forceful and wanting people to breastfeed and those sorts of things, when that's not the case. I personally like to push back a little bit more and have people come to me, because it is their option to feed. It is not my job to make them do anything. So say you never see that room, then again, that first visit, you make sure to just have the resources. At every first visit you go into a room, have a paper with resources, and you can say, all right, it's up to you now, you do you, but you can call me if you need me. And that is pretty much it with those type of rooms. Okay, we went over a lot, but I probably missed some things, so who knows, maybe there'll be a part 2. If you have questions or concerns, or you're just like, okay, I'm gonna work in the hospital, but I wanna know this, or I wanna know that, leave the questions in the comments, or you can email me. Again, if I need to make a follow-up video, I will. But right now, I just feel like I said as much as I possibly feel that I can say. And I really hope it helps. Again, I'll leave all the links down in the description. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. Subscribe, share this, send it to your friends. Again, in the description, I'll have some of my own courses and products linked. I would love it if you shared those or check them out, whatever. And Thanks for watching.